Welcome to the Gaza War Sit Rep, day 98. This is the night of January 12th. And as I promised yesterday to do one after the Israeli defense at the International Court of Justice. So here I am. The Israeli defense at the International Court of Justice is not actually of that much interest. It was the same lies that we have been hearing the whole time. A lot of screaming Hamas, a lot of claiming that the court, the South Africans, everybody is biased against Israel because they won't let them commit this genocide. There's logical contradictions, legal contradictions, moral failings, all too numerous to be listed. One contradiction that I haven't noticed too many people point out was that they said something like, if this is genocide, then you're cheapening the word genocide. Also, what happened to us on October 7th was a second Holocaust, and Hamas is the ones committing genocide. So, well, to defend Israel and what Israel's doing requires moral collapse and logical failures. And so it's no surprise that that's what the legal team brought to the table. It's also the defensive behavior of people, a state, an entity that is clearly used to not having to explain itself and does not ever. Its representatives don't believe they should have to explain themselves. And the same goes for the Western defenders of it. They were just very dismissive. Blinken, Kirby, whatever, all of those American officials, Canadian officials today, the Prime Minister of Canada, the various ministers of Canada have gone on record dismissing South Africa's case. So again, I guess we should game it out. It's going to take these judges apparently weeks to figure out what it is that they should decide. Provisional measures, which means they can either order Israel to stop. Human rights organizations don't like to order belligerents to stop. So we could see something like that. We could see something like the International Court of Justice behaving like Amnesty International or Human Rights Watch and saying, please conduct your genocide in a less dangerous way, or tone down the rhetoric or whatever. Maybe they'll just say, we understand you have a right to self-defense and please go and kill people, but not too much, not too bad. So I think those are the options. They could find simply in favor of Israel, which would mean the court was corrupted and the outcome stitched up from the beginning. They could find basically that provisional measures mean Israel needs to stop, and effectively ordering Israel to effectively ordering a ceasefire coming from the court. Or they could order some inadequate thing, some splitting the difference to try to make it seem like the court is still relevant, like international law is still relevant, while not actually offering any meaningful constraint. I mean, not that, of course, Israel will always be free to ignore, but an inadequate finding like please conduct your war more nicely would be perfect for Israel, because Israel could say yes, of course, that's what we'll do, and thank you very much, and we'll do that. Or we've been doing that all along, which was also part of their defense. So I guess we'll see in a few weeks. I in a sense, the importance of the trial at the International Court of Justice was day one, was the South African lawyers and what they presented, the farcical nature of Israel's defense today, and in fact the ruling that the court makes, which is going to be ignored anyway, are less important than the fact that South Africa brought this suit, made this case in front of the world. That's I said yesterday, as a realpolitik, someone with a realpolitik understanding of the world, I can never get overexcited about what happens in courtrooms and international law. But that it's not without importance, and it's not without meaning. The other thing that's clear to me, especially now that I watched it, is the alternative to finding for South Africa, the alternative that the it's not really the International Court of Justice, it's more like, I would say, the US. What the US is facing here is a choice between letting the International Court of Justice make this decision that clearly follows the law and logic and morality, or just absolutely flaming the court once and for all. And that means the International Court of Justice is over. It's exposed as a corrupt and useless institution, which I suspect it is. But, I guess I do think that more people, how to put it, more people, more of a mass recognition of the uselessness of international institutions is bad for the US. This is a bad thing. It's actually the imperialist countries that depend on these institutions far more, despite what they would have you believe. It's them that need everybody to follow the law and everybody to use these mechanisms to settle their disputes. And it's them that want all of these things to be channeled through international institutions under their control, as opposed to searching for and creating alternatives, which is what will have to happen if the International Court of Justice is found to be corrupt, which is what's at stake here. And then you'll see global South nations just making bilateral decisions. You'll see aid programs rolled out on a bilateral basis, and you'll see bilateral dispute mechanisms through BRICS or Shanghai Cooperation or whatever other alternatives there are. And those will become the new forums for dispute resolution between countries as well. So it's not a small deal. I don't think it's the big deal that some are making of it, and I don't think that it's gonna be where this is decided. So I guess with that, let's go back to our 5 other fronts, and of course we have to start with Yemen. The Americans unilaterally bombed the airport in Sanaa again in Yemen. Yemen has presumably been fighting back. There have been some statements. There have been some, of course, very strong statements by Yemen, very strong songs that they've sung. You may have seen the demonstration in the capital of at least 1 million people yet again on Friday. And the song that they sing, the chant that they have, I might as well show it to you on Aldan Marki's Twitter, Aldan Marki, ALDANMARKI, one of the best Twitter accounts to follow on anything related to Yemen. And the chant apparently goes, "We do not care, make it a world war, make it a grand world war. Our hearts long for rifles and battles. By God, living like this is forbidden to me." So not deterred. I think we can safely say not deterred. Now, people have pointed out that this is an extremely asymmetric situation, that Yemen does not have anything like the armament that NATO is bringing to bear in the Red Sea, and that's true. But what Yemen does have is it's not that different from, for example, the DPRK, otherwise known as North Korea. They are it's not that they can hit you with the same firepower that you can hit them with. It's just that you can't do very much to them because they have endured so much, and they have the ability to they have developed some form of deterrence. So the missiles and the drones that Ansar Allah in Yemen has are analysts have pointed out that they're a few $1,000s per drone, and when they're launched at a U.S. naval ship's anti-aircraft system or air defense, the air defense missiles that are shooting them down are millions of dollars. So Yemen has far less money than the US, but the US has a lot of places to spend that money and a lot of demand on those missiles that have to be everywhere in the world. The US has interests everywhere. Yemen has interests only in trying to stop the genocide in Gaza at the moment. That's their only interest, and their tool is what they are using right now in the Red Sea to try to stop shipping. They are so what happens when their multi-$1,000 drones exhaust the supply of multi-million-dollar air defense missiles on these finite supplied, terrifying naval assets that the US has? Then they would be firing missiles and drones at unprotected ships. And so the mathematical equation that's happening here, the calculations that the US has to be making, I'm not sure. They don't look favorable to me. Maybe, as always, I'm missing something. So that's Yemen. So I guess one point, and we'll probably come back to this, is that the same way that asymmetric and guerrilla warfare is occurring in Gaza and has happened historically with Vietnam and many other examples, there's a kind of an asymmetric naval conflict happening in the Red Sea. And I didn't really know asymmetric naval conflicts existed, and I don't know of too many other precedents for this, but this is certainly one of them. Now we're witnessing yet another unprecedented occurrence. Maybe it's not unprecedented. I've been studying a little bit more about naval warfare recently, and usually it's one state against another. The great naval battles of history are between belligerents of, comparable, at least status, right? I mean, of course, when you talk about World War I and the German Navy going up against the British Navy, the British Navy is much bigger and more powerful. The German ships are well equipped and technological, but the Royal Navy, the British Navy, is superior. So of course, there's always asymmetries at sea, but the idea of like a guerrilla warfare happening at sea, pirates, I don't think quite work that way. Although that's the way that the U.S. War propaganda is trying to paint Ansar Allah as pirates. But this goes way beyond pirates. This is much more like naval guerrilla warfare, naval asymmetric warfare. So we'll come back to this probably again and again. We have absolutely not seen. We're only seeing the beginning of this. We're not seeing the end of. We're nowhere near the end of this. The other key point that I think the U.S. is going to have to focus the minds of the U.S. who want to conduct a war on Ansar Allah in Yemen is that Yemen has said that the Arab countries that allow the U.S. to use their airspace as transit on their way to bombing Yemen will be treated as enemies as well. Which means, yesterday in my sit rep, I said that because Saudi Arabia is trying to calm things down and take a more neutral position. Saudi Arabia, which has been the principal bomber and attacker of Yemen using US weapons for 7 years, from 2015 to 2022, is trying to keep things calm and de-escalate things. But if and I mentioned that means that Yemen doesn't have the ability to target these very valuable oil infrastructure targets that brought the war quickly to an end when Yemen started to do that in 2022. But if Saudi airspace is used, that could be back on the table. So we are again in a very uncertain situation on that front. Well, not just that front. So as far as Lebanon goes, we have more fighting, the continuing war of attrition on the Lebanon front. We have I don't think there's, let me see if there's been any major, I don't think I've seen anything beyond, I don't think I've seen anything today about Hezbollah. I could be wrong. There are, on the other hand, just to say about on the Palestine front, there have been a number of attacks in the West Bank, in Tulkarm. Tulkarm is one of the West Bank cities that has been completely surrounded by the so-called apartheid wall. There have been attacks in Jenin. So there's fighting in Jenin, there's fighting in Tulkarm. These are both important cities in the West Bank. And fighting in Gaza, as always. There was a report of another evacuation of Israeli soldiers from Gaza. Yes, casualties on the, they did announce casualties on the Lebanon front as well. So we have Gaza, Lebanon, and the West Bank all active ground fighting. Iraq, there's an Iraqi resistance groups have claimed attacks, 2 further missile attacks on in northern Iraq, again near Erbil, I believe, targeting possible U.S. and Israeli intelligence assets. There have been rocket attacks from Gaza. I'm just scrolling to find the news about the Iraqi resistance attack. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, having some trouble finding it. I believe it was 2 separate missile attacks in Iraq, and I have not seen anything on the Syria front. Yes, attacking. So the Iraqi resistance attacked a US base in Syria with missiles. Gaza attacked. There were attacks from Gaza into Ashdod and a few other parts of the so-called Gaza envelope and beyond, inside the borders of Israel. And so active rocket and missile fire from Iraq into Syria, a war of attrition on the Lebanon front, fighting in Gaza, fighting in the West Bank, and the war ongoing in Yemen, virtually across the board. There's also, there was a video today from Al-Quds, Soraya Al-Quds, which is the armed wing of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. And they sent a video maybe of a day or 2 ago, but of mortar attacks in in Gaza. So I think that covers all the fronts, and there's absolutely no let up on any of them. There's escalation in the West Bank, and then there's this war in the Red Sea and the bombing of Yemen. So in future updates, there's a piece that I'm reading that I want to get back to you guys on when I've read enough of it. And I think I've mentioned this dynamic before, but I'll just give you a preview. The dynamic is one where it goes back to World War II, and it's a book called "Why Did the Heavens Not Darken" by Arno Meyer, and it's about the Holocaust basically. And the fundamental argument of the book is that when the German army in World War II was losing, when they realized they weren't going to win after invading Russia, after invading the Soviet Union, the initial plan in 1941 was always to deport the Jewish population, which they hated and loathed and were racist against. But so the first few months were going very well for them, and so they were happy with this deportation plan. But as things started to go badly for them militarily, was when they began to develop more and more of a Holocaust genocidal impulse towards civilian Jewish people. And that is a dynamic that I think needs to be studied and an analogy made between losing militarily and kind of taking it out on civilians, or going more genocidal against civilians when you are losing militarily. So I'll come back with more notes from that. And I also want to go back over October 7th yet again. We have to go through that day very carefully and find out really exactly what happened from all the sources. We want to find out the best information on who, how much the role that friendly fire played, especially on the scale of civilian casualties in the Gaza envelope. Okay, I'll stop there. That's day 98, and I'll see you in a few days. We'll probably do something for day 100, but next week we'll get back into October 7th, and I'm sure there will be huge updates. The court is not going to roll for a while. You probably have heard that Germany has announced that, based on literally, it's hard to parody these people, but they've announced that because they know so much about genocide, because they've committed it, they've decided that that Israel is not committing it, and they're going to intervene as a third party when the case reaches its merit stage. The other thing, one last thing about the case, that everybody seems to accept the merits stage of the case is going to take years. It shouldn't take years. There's no logical reason why it should take years. And the notion of international justice just simply having to take years, the court having to take years to decide whether a genocide took place, that's not to the court's credit. It's not to the credit of these institutions at all. And that alone is a reason why such a court should not, may not be taken as seriously as it pretends to be, or would like to be. Okay, I'll stop there, and I'll see you again in a few days.